everyone, I have released and posted your midterm grades, so please take a look at your grades as well as the feedback I provided. The feedback is located in both your essay as well as the rubric. So please let me know if you have any questions or need clarification. I am available by email and I'm also available by Zoom. But if you want a conference with me via Zoom, then just let me know you're available, date and time, and then we can set something up to talk whether it's about the exam or anything else. Okay, so I want to go over the exam. First of all, I want to explain my objectives, or what's called student learning outcomes for the exam. In other words, what I want you to learn from the exam, what I'm assessing from the exam, etc. First of all, I was assessing your understanding of the content and how you answered the question. What you actually have to answer the question. So I was assessing your understanding of the information that you're providing as evidence, the details that you're providing. So that's one. Another is to assess your ability to critically think and analyze. First of all, you need to choose which question you're going to answer. So that's analysis. Then you're going to have to determine what sources you're going to use to answer the question. Are you going to use a lecture? Are you going to use the textbook? Are you going to use the source analysis assignments? And when you're choosing the 5 required primary sources, which sources you're going to use, which of those sources helps you answer that question. And then I'm also assessing your ability to analyze the sources themselves, to pull the examples from those sources, and to help support your statements in your answer to the essay question. Next, I'm assessing your ability to cite sources using MLA style. You needed to cite both in the body of the essay as well as on a works cited page. And I'll get into that a little bit more in just a few minutes. And then finally, I wanted to assess your ability to write a thesis statement. So let's take a look at the essay prompt, and I want to go through the essay prompt and just kind of let you know what I was looking for. Okay, first of all, as I mentioned, you had to answer one of the 2 questions that I listed below. So you got to choose which question you wanted to answer. Both of them were comparison questions. Your essay had to consist of an introduction, 3 body paragraphs, and a conclusion, which pretty much almost all of you did, so that was great. Your essay needed to include a thesis statement, and that's basically just the answer to the essay question. You know how I have asked you to give a primary source answer in your source analysis? This is what I was preparing you for, in a way. It's kind of the same idea. Your thesis statement should answer the essay question. You were to provide supporting evidence from the materials provided in this course, including your textbook, lectures, films, websites, source analysis. All of those were fair game for locating the information and using as evidence. You had to use a minimum of 5 separate primary sources, and the source only counts once towards your 5 required. So in other words, I wanted you to find 5 primary sources, and generally you're going to find them in the source analysis assignments, or for example, you could have went to the virtual Jamestown website and use those primary sources. We went over a couple of those primary sources in an activity that you did. And then of course you had your Puritan Life sources that you could have used those as well. So the intent there was not for you just to use those 5 required sources, but to use everything, to use all the course materials when providing evidence. But I wanted you to provide the 5 required sources because I'm testing your ability to provide, to pull examples from those sources. That's why I put the hint there, that you can use the sources we discussed in your assignments. All right, so I also wanted you to cite all of your sources and connect your evidence to your thesis statement. My intent here was for you to cite everything, to cite the textbook, to cite the Puritan Life assignments, or the website, or the lecture, or the film, or whatever it is you were using, to cite everything, regardless of what you use. And the reason I do this is for a couple of reasons. One, this class is an online class, and I have to be able to ensure the integrity of the course. So I want to ensure that you are not just copy and pasting from history.com, or finding on the internet somewhere, because I can't control those sources. I know what information I provide to you, and I can't control what's on those sources. So I don't want you to get bad history, or bad information. And it's kind of easy to do that when you're on an online course. Now, I'm not saying that any of you do that or would do that. I'm just saying that is the reason that I have you cite all sources, including textbook and lecture, because all of that information didn't necessarily come from your brain. You got that information from somewhere, and I'm trying to teach you that. Also, if this were in an in-person class, I probably would not have asked you to cite the textbook or films and such. But because this is an online class, that's the way I do it. With that being said, the majority of you did not do that, and I think that might have been a misunderstanding on the assignment. I don't think that probably wasn't clear on this assignment. Therefore, I did not count that against you if you didn't cite the textbook and the lectures and so forth. I did count it against you if you didn't cite the 5 required primary sources, but I didn't count it against you if you didn't cite the rest of it, because I think that was a little bit unclear. So keep that in mind. Also, when you are using your sources or citing your sources, please don't just quote. I know that is your tendency to do. I know that is often the way you are taught to do that, particularly in your English classes when you're reading literature pieces. But history is a little bit different. I don't want you to just quote. I want you to be able to just explain. Explain your information. I have went ahead and added the ACE method. It's a little bit of a video, or it's a video rather, and if you want to take a look at that, maybe for those of you who don't know how to explain sources, that might help you a little bit. It does mention quoting in there, but I suggest that you don't necessarily need to quote. You can just go straight to explain. Now, I don't mind quoting if it's really pertinent, if it really makes sense to quote, but just really keep that to a minimum. Okay, so let's take a look at the questions themselves. For the first one, I asked you to compare and contrast the Chesapeake, Virginia, Jamestown, and New England colonies. In your answer, be sure to explain their economic, including labor, political, and social systems. Also, be sure to explain their religion and relationship with Native Americans. Okay, so first of all, the economic system in the Chesapeake. I wanted you to mention something about tobacco, about the headright system, about indentured servitude, as well as slavery. But I wanted you to explain it, not just 1 or 2 sentences. I wanted you to explain what those were. For example, explain indentured servitude. You could use an example from the contract examples that we used in that activity for virtual Jamestown. You could have used that to give an example of what indentured servitude was. So I wanted you to explain all of that for the Chesapeake. For New England, I wanted you to emphasize that it was family labor and maybe give an example of that. I believe there's a couple of examples in the Puritan Life sources that you could have used. I believe one of them was the Lawrence Hammond source that talks about the importance of family labor. That's an example of family labor. I wanted you to give me a comparison of political systems. That was pretty straightforward. You could have actually just looked at the chart for that one. They had in the Chesapeake, they had the House of Burgesses that had slave codes. You could give me an example of a slave code from the virtual Jamestown site. For New England, most of their political system was really centered around religion and the fact that it was they had a separation of church and state. That was in the lecture. You could have looked at that. You could have included that. Social systems, I kind of let that. That was pretty wide open. You could have talked about the information that I provided in the lecture for New England. I talked about marriage. I talked about kind of different how it was a father-driven patriarchy, sorry, as well as you could have talked about a number of different things or aspects of their childhood in that question. So you could have gone to the lecture or to the sources for that. You could have, you could have also talked about their religion with respect to social systems as well. Those were found in the sources as well. Wanted you to describe religion in both colonies. In the Chesapeake, it was primarily Anglican. They believed in an angry God, as so did the New England colonies. But the New England colony really centered their entire community around religion. Specifically, I wanted you to talk about Calvinism. I wanted you to talk about this idea of predestination. An example of that in your Puritan life sources was Samuel Mather and how he's angry with God and how he's worried about God. A lot of this relates to their understanding of predestination and how you basically everything is decided for you. There is no free agency. That you have to continually do good works to be able to get in God's good graces. Samuel Mather was clearly expressing that in that source. It also talked about his relationship with his father, the fact that he is going to his father for guidance. That's part of their religious background. With respect to the Native Americans, I wanted you to talk about the different conflicts in each of the colonies, the Powhatans, King Philip's War, all of that. Okay, the second question, compare and contrast the New England or Mass Bay and Pennsylvania colonies. In your answer, be sure to describe economic, including labor, political, and social systems, including personal relationships. Hint, don't forget to include the role of religion played in their society. Also explain their relationship with Native Americans. So, as far as the economic system, most of you did pretty well with this. Again, the same thing as I mentioned above with Mass Bay. Their idea of family labor, agriculture, fishing, that sort of thing. Pennsylvania, very similar in that respect that they had agriculture, farming. Their political systems, they both had assemblies or elected assemblies. Would you explain that? Social systems, you could again talk about. You could use the Puritan life sources for this with respect to Mass Bay. I didn't really have any sources for you in the Pennsylvania colonies other than what I provided in the course materials because we didn't have any source analysis for that. So a lot of your source analysis there should have really come from the Mass Bay. Religion, again, the fact what I've explained earlier. Just New England had Calvinism, predestination, angry God. Whereas Pennsylvania was really more tolerant of different types of religion, whereas Mass Bay wasn't. Pennsylvania believed in an open and loving God. You want to talk about the Quakers. As far as their social systems, you could have talked about, again, the same thing I mentioned earlier with New England. But in Pennsylvania, you could have talked about the Quakers and the fact that they had female religious leaders, they're a lot more open about that, just different types of things like that. And then the relationship with Native Americans. The New England colony had conflicts with the Native Americans, whereas Pennsylvania had some conflicts too. But they, at least for a long while, they had a pretty uh, decent relationship um, with the Native Americans. So they kind of saw things a little bit differently. So that's what I was looking for. So in this essay, I did not count off for spelling or grammar, mechanics, or anything of that nature. But for the more formal essay, which is the 100-point essay, which will be coming up, I will be. So that'll be a little bit more formal. So I will provide instructions for that as well as the essay prompt in not too long. But you're going to be required to kind of do some of the same things as I asked you to do here. Okay, so as I said, I put another, it's called the ACE method. I put a little tutorial on that on the modules under the templates and tutorials if you guys want to take a look at that, if that's helpful. And again, just let me know if you have any questions or concerns. And if you didn't do well on this exam, please understand that, first of all, you're midway through the course and there is a whole nother half to go. There's more points going to be available, more opportunities available. So you're just midway. Also, for this midterm, I am going to offer an extra credit opportunity. So it's going to be very similar to the American Revolution source analysis extra credit opportunity, where you are going to just fix the issues that I mentioned in my feedback. So basically, you'll get the opportunity to earn back about half of your points. So if you miss 10 points, you can earn back 5. If you miss 15 points, you can earn back 7.5, and so on and so forth. So that will help you a little bit. I won't add it to necessarily change your score here. It'll just be added in as extra credit, and that will kind of make up for some of the points that you lost. So because I want you to get, I want you to feel like you're understanding it. I want you to be successful. I want you to learn. And also, earn some points back for doing so. But again, this is, this is a college course, and more is expected. They call it higher learning for a reason, and some of you may have never taken college courses, and that's okay. I understand that. So don't be too discouraged if you didn't do as well as you wanted to do. But there is plenty of time, and I am offering my help. If you want to meet with me, send me an email, whatever that is. I'm happy to do so. Okay, so I hope you guys have a good week.